Okay, next up, Shaman, Neptulon, and the Siltfin Spirit Walker. I did briefly discuss these two cards as well as the 3/2 Warlock known as the Puddle Jumper. It's a neutral card, by the way. These cards make Murlocs a little bit more scary than they were previously. Murlocs, of course, were good at stomping noobs, but not good for much else, too vulnerable to AoE and that kind of thing. Neptulon gives you 4 cards to your hand. They are all Murloc cards. 7 mana, also has the Overload of 3, but if you're playing Murloc, that won't be too bad because you're just going to dump those cards the next hand anyway. If you have 4 or 5 mana to spend, that likely is actually enough to play all of those Murlocs. Obviously, you only run this legendary in a Murloc deck, but the ability to refresh your hand 4 cards is absolutely crazy. It means if you get screwed over by AoE early, you're not completely out of it. And Siltfin Spirit Walker does a very similar thing. It's a Cult Master for Murlocs only. It's a 2/5 for 4, and it also has 1 Overload, but whenever a friendly Murloc dies, you draw a card. I think in a Murloc deck, this card would be slightly stronger than Cult Master, just because it will get the Murloc synergy. If you have those Murloc War Leaders, any Murloc becomes a lot better than it was previously. And being able to draw cards by, running some of your Murlocs in, that's pretty good. I think Cult Master previously, if you were going to try Murlocs, was one of the cards that was good in the deck. And any Shaman Murloc deck, I think, will run both an Neptulon and Siltfin Spirit Walker, pretty obviously. Will it be good enough to make like Legend or something like that? That has yet to be seen. But it's a deck worth considering. Someone's going to try it. Next up, the Power Mace, which is a 3/2 mace for 3 mana, having 3 attacks, pretty nice. And as Death Rattle effect, this mace will give a random friendly mech +2/+2. Now, if you're playing Mech Shaman, I think this card's actually amazing. Giving +2/+2 is usually a buff effect that's reserved only for cards like Mark of the Wild, which is a 2 mana spell, or Demon Fire, which is a crappy 2 mana spell. But in addition to that, having 2 swings with a 3 damage weapon is excellent. This is a very, very good weapon. Any Mech Shaman deck, I believe, should be running this. You just get too much value for what you're paying. Excellent card. And lastly, for Shaman, we have the Vitality Totem. It's interesting that they're finally adding in a new totem to the game. Will it make cards like, what's it called, Totemic Might useful? The card for 0 mana gives all your totems +2 health permanently. Maybe one day. Now's not that day, of course. But what this 0/3 totem does, of course costs 2 mana, is at the end of your turn restore 4 health to your hero. Now, Shamans were pretty weak on the healing before, so if you wanted to play a more defensive or stalling Shaman deck, or later into the game you needed to save yourself from dying, maybe go very late against a handlock and you're worried about him drawing into a couple Soulfires, Vitality Totem could really save your ass. That's a lot of healing per turn. It does the same amount of healing as the Illuminator, but different from the Illuminator is it doesn't matter if you have a secret or not, you just get the health back at the end of your turn. So for control Shamans, or maybe even non-control Shamans, or Shamans that use a lot of weapons, anyone who needs to heal themselves back up, this is a good healing card. And will we see use of it? Some people might put one in constructed decks. In Arena, maybe not so great in Arena, unless you draft like 4 of the Flame Tongue totems so that you can eventually use this guy to attack with as well. Might not be as great. You definitely want to play this with Flame Tongue totems, as you do with any amount of totems on the field ideally. Or Bloodlust. Bloodlust would also work. Decent card. Next up, Warlock, one of my favorite classes. Mal'Ganis. We took a look at that demon the other day, and I think it's actually a very, 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 very strong legendary. Not only is it a 9/7 for 9 mana, which is actually iffy on the stats, a little bit better than Cenarius in some ways, more stats total, worse distribution, but all your other demons on the field gain +2/+2 stats while he's alive. And if you're playing a demon deck, which I believe, given the next cards that we're going to look at, are going to be a lot more prominent now in this expansion, Mal'Ganis is really, really good in that kind of deck. +2/+2, not to be underestimated, especially if it benefits all your cards in the field because you're only running demons. So you could think of it as like the Warlock Cenarius, and Cenarius was good in Druids. People play that in Constructed, even at Legend. I mean, from what I've seen, I'm not a Legend player, full disclosure, but I do watch a lot of Trump, a lot of Nas, that kind of stuff. Anyway, your hero is also immune, and that means you can't take damage while this guy's on the field. So it could even be seen in something like a Demon Handlock deck, because protecting your hero from dying is very, very good for Handlock. Jiraxxus kind of fulfills the same role, where if you get too low, you can always bring out Jiraxxus and heal back up to 15. Now, a couple things to note is, I'm not 100% certain on this, but if your hero is immune to damage, I believe that would imply that when you do a life tap, the life tap health effect doesn't actually damage you, and if you play a Pit Lord on the back of this, the battle cry is nullified, you don't take the damage. Same with the Flame Imp, and those are cards you would probably, or maybe consider for a demon deck, and yeah, that makes Mal'Ganis a little bit better because it can save you some HP. Cool legendary, I think it'll make demons very viable actually. Next up we have the Anima Golem, which is a huge mech unit. I previously thought it was neutral for some reason, I couldn't see the fact it was purple. For 6 mana, you're getting a 9/9 mech, which is kind of like bringing out a huge golem. But the downside is at the end of each turn, destroy this minion if it's your only one. So that would imply to me, you would only really want to run this guy in something that's very durable, always going to have something on the field, like a Zoo deck. Now, if you're playing Zoo, I could see this card being pretty good. Or if you're playing a Mech Zoo, if that will be a thing, I don't know about that. But let's just say standard Zoo for now. You might have some Death Rattle minions, such as the... Well, you could consider running Haunted Creeper with this. That might be pretty good, because Haunted Creeper's tough to remove, Harvest Golem. Or you can just go for more standard Zoo cards, like Flame Imp, maybe Voidwalker, maybe... well, not Shattered Sun Cleric anymore. But you get the idea. Stuff that's going to stay on the field, really only vulnerable to a major AoE. In a Zoo deck, I could see it. 9/9 is huge, and if your opponent can't deal with it by clearing your board and then immediately destroying this one because you'd have no more board, then it's a huge threat, definitely. I don't know if it's going to be good enough to really run. The downside is pretty huge, and it's not too hard to play around. You can always remove it with a regular spell too, like a Shadowward Death. Worth considering, worth playing around, definitely. Next up, the Floating Watcher. Whenever your hero takes damage on your turn, gain +2/+2. This card would be amazing if it was take damage on any turn, but I mean, they don't want to make it too overpowered. For 5 mana, you're only getting a base stats of 4/4. Because it's a demon, this would be a card you want to run with Mal'Ganis, probably. I'm not sure about a regular, like, classic Handlock or classic Zoo deck. If you play this guy, you can always life tap to take the damage. That's probably the ideal scenario. Or if you play this with other demons, actually playing it with a Pit Lord or a Flame Imp would be good, because those damage your hero too. So maybe this guy benefits most from playing with other demons, which is an interesting way of synergizing. Demon cards, they synergize when your hero dies by taking too much damage. Hooray! As for sexual viability, I'll try him out in a demon deck. Will he be better than the other demons? He would be nice if you could get him out by using Voidcaller. And the Voidcaller dies, you get a Floating Watcher, and then maybe you life tap to make him a 6/6. That could be good. Yep. Probably demon decks, and that's about it. I would think so. Maybe Handlock. Hard to say for certain. In Arena? I think he's an average card in Arena. It's not too hard to take damage. I mean, you can always life tap. And if you get him to 6/6 stats, that's pretty good. If you can find another way to take that damage, or you want to punish your opponent for trying to rush you down, you could try Floating Watcher. Next up, the Mistress of Pain, who has pretty bad stats. It's a 2 mana 1/4, and the reason her attack is so low is that whenever this minion does damage, you restore that much health to your hero. So if you were trying to run a demon deck that maybe needs to heal itself up because it plays too many Pit Lords, you could also combine this with a card like Demon Fire to make a 3/6 instead of a 1/4, allowing the Mistress of Pain to heal for 3 damage on every attack instead of 1. I mean, that's the only real way you really want to play Mistress of Pain, if you can buff its attack up. Then that healing could be pretty good for you, pretty crucial. As far as a non-pure demon deck, it really depends. Like, do you need the healing, or are you just going to rely on Earthen Ring, Farseers, and Jiraxxus instead? I think it'll be a niche card. I don't think it'll be run really outside of a constructed demon deck. And in Arena, that healing is not really that needed, and you probably won't have too many Dark Iron Dwarves to make her decent. And a 1/4 isn't that great in Arena. You can just take a look at that Naru bar that makes battle cries, costs 2 more, but its stats are 1/4, not a great Arena card. Now, next up we have the Dark Bomb, which I actually think is a fantastic removal card for Warlocks. Similar to the Lightning Bolt, it deals 3 damage. You're paying 2 mana for it immediately, instead of 1 on the turn you play it, and then 1 as an overload. But yeah, otherwise it's a Lightning Bolt. Downside is you can't combine it with cards like the Unbound Elemental, but that's just fine. Being able to deal 3 damage as a Warlock is pretty decent. Is it better than Shadow Bolt? Yeah, I'd say so. Losing 1 damage for 1 less mana, and also having the ability to use it as direct damage to your opponent if you need to finish them, is pretty good. I'd say it's a card that will see some play. Will be used in every single deck? I kind of question that. Now, one thing to note is that the new version of Soulfire is 1 mana, discard a card, deal 4 damage. Whereas this is 2 mana, deal 3 damage, no discard a card effect. Would you want to run both of those cards, of both Soulfire and Dark Bomb now that Soulfire got nerfed, or would you only want to run one of those? And if you're only going to run one of those, is there any circumstance where you would run Dark Bomb instead of Soulfire? I think it's something worth considering. Discarding a card is a pretty big difference for losing 1 mana, and often you can take something out with 3 damage that you could with 4 anyway. So it's an interesting card. I think it's pretty good. I definitely would draft it in Arena, I believe. Dealing 3 damage, it makes Frostbolt good enough to run, so I think it would make Dark Bomb good enough to run anyway. And Warlocks have been really weak on having enough removal, so Dark Bomb kind of covers that now. Next up, the Implosion. This is a card which I kind of question a little bit. It does 2 to 4 damage to a minion, which isn't great because that means the damage is randomized and you don't know what kind of result you're going to get. You don't know if it's actually going to kill anything. And for each damage you deal, it does summon a 1/1 imp, which of course is a demon for each damage dealt. That means it would be pretty good if you can play it while you have a Mal'Ganis on the field or something like that. But outside of a demon synergy, blah 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 blah. Outside of a demon synergy deck, I kind of question its value. It's expensive removal. 1/1 tokens are iffy. I mean, Warlocks don't really have anything that can benefit from having a lot of 1/1s on the board. The only cards I could really think of would be like a Direwolf Alpha in a Zoo deck, and maybe I could see that. The problem would be that the imps all have to survive a turn, and they're extremely vulnerable to AoE while they're just out there for summoning sickness. In Arena, I think it would be an okay card to pick. You can maybe kill off a weak creature and get some 1/1s on the board. It's only really that great if you have, if you get the max damage. Actually, the best situation I could see for this card outside of a demon deck would be if you're playing spell damage, because each extra damage you deal means it's going to be summoning another imp. So, what if you did a... Okay. Here's where this card's good. Malygos Warlock. Deal 7 to 9 damage and summon 7 to 9 imps. Value. But yeah, in seriousness, if you can get Demon Synergy, if you have a Direwolf Alpha, or if you have some spell damage to make the damage on this card better, then it's a pretty playable card. Outside of that, for 4 mana, it's not really worth it. I'd probably almost rather have a Shadow Bolt for 3 mana instead of this. So, meh.